recording right as it's live. So there you go. Hey, everybody. We are live. Welcome to Business Shenanigans. And we are trying something completely new today. It's the first time Kerry and I have done sort of a quadra thing, you know, a four-way thing. So we're I know. We're experimental. We're feeling really experimental that way. And we're happy to have you. You know me, Kathy Klotz-Guest of Keeping It Human. And with me is, as always, is the co-hostess with the mostest. You know, Kerry Gorgone. What can you say about Kerry Gorgone other than she's the hostess with the mostest?
Kerry Gorgone, host of the Marketing Profs podcast.
That's it. She's pretty great. No, she is. Well, that's true. I could technically say that. That's true. She is all that. And what she does on Marketing Profs for that podcast is fantastic. You have to check that out. Please do check it out. She's also a lot of fun to talk to here. So.
Well, one of our guests today was on my podcast recently.
Yes, and we've got two amazing guests, and I'm so excited to have them from Brain Trust Insights. We've got Chris Penn and co-founder, and I hope I say it right, Katie Lioy.
That's correct. Yep.
Hey. Yes. I don't like butchering people's names. It happens to me all the time, and to Klotz, and so I'm totally sensitive. I get it.
I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being here, you two. We're so excited to have you, and so I'm going to launch kind of a big salvo out there in the big ocean to be boiled. What's the big 50,000 foot story about predictive analytics? Because everyone talks about, first of all, we've been talking about big data. We've been talking about data mining, and we've been talking about all this intelligence for years. And, you know, it's the promise. It's the Holy Land. It's like, rainbows and unicorns. And I think there's just understanding or belief that it's going to be the answer in the salvation to all of our information needs. But there's also a lot of fear. So what's the big story, do you think, on predictive analytics?
Predictive analytics and predictive algorithms have been around, like the ones that we're using in production today were invented in the 70s. They are as old or older than I am. And
wow.
That's young.
That's so young.
I'm pretty sure we're the same age around, so.
Probably around the same age. But I mean, if you think about it, though, it's not until now that we've had the computing power in these, lovely devices that we all own to pull it off. Prediction in general is pretty easy. Like, the day after Thanksgiving is going to be a big shopping day. You know that from November, the last Thursday in November through, the winter holidays, if you're in B2B, you're probably not going to be getting a whole lot of work done, right? So these things in general, but where the value of prediction and predictive analytics is in the specificity. If you knew what week something was going to happen, or maybe even what day something was going to happen, weeks, months in advance, you could plan ahead and you could build strategy around that. And that's where the value of these algorithms is, with granularity, this is when something's going to happen, so I can plan ahead. One of the things we like to say at the shop is, push on the peaks, plan on the dips. So all the time you have these ups and downs throughout the year, and you don't have to spend all your money all at once and hope it works out. You can do it much more strategically. The other thing I think I would say is that predictive analytics is not the salvation. It is not the one truth. There are two major flaws to it. One, you can't predict what's never happened. So natural disaster, political turmoil, cultural upheaval, stock market crash, all these things can have a significant and adverse impact on your predictions, but there's no way you can predict them. And the second thing is that these are forecasts. So you don't check the weather once per year and then get dressed for the rest of the year, right? You check the weather fairly frequently. I check the weather.
I realize the same thing all the time. So
exactly.
It doesn't matter what the weather is.
It is kind of repetitive, I'm going to be honest.
It is.
But you would use these forecasts like a weather forecast and check them regularly and frequently.
Yeah. No, and that's a really important point, because something that hasn't happened yet is not a scenario that you can predict into the future. And so I think it's interesting, because I think the story that is out there sort of in the business press has always been like, big data, everybody's doing it, everybody's talking about it, just like teenagers and sex, everybody's like talking about it and doing it. They're just talking about it, they're not doing it. They're really not doing it. And I think part of the frustration is it's always one of those things like it's imminent. And really, if you look at a lot of, I think, some of the real things happening with like blockchain and big data, it was really the big companies that were doing it because they had the deep pockets and the resources. And even they weren't necessarily doing it to the fullest of its potential because they didn't really understand it. I think that's it seems to me that's sort of a sub-thread or sub-narrative here.
I could see people freaking out about this whole predictive thing because they're not even using descriptive analytics really well yet.
Yeah.
And what should they do?
Yeah,
They're like, they need to go back to school.
Yeah.
Well, I think what we see as well is that, these quote unquote new techniques come out. Like Chris said, predictive isn't new, but there's just a new application for it. And then suddenly it becomes this buzzword and it's like the magic bullet. It's the solution. If I do predictive, I'll fix all my problems.
Right.
But really it's one of many things that you should continually be doing. We would never do a predictive forecast and say, we have all of your answers. We'd probably look at about at least half a dozen other things in addition to. And I think that that's one of the misunderstandings of what predictive can do. It's a very powerful tool, but it's not the be all and end all solution of everything. It's just
people love hearing they have lots of problems. That must go over. We can fix one.
It's sort of the core of what Chris and I do. We just go and we're like, yep, everything's broken. Good luck.
Learn Python.
Yeah.
Yep. That's accurate.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things, and Ivan Temelkov, hey, Ivan is saying here, he said data is boring because most marketers despise numbers, and yet he says he has yet to meet a marketer who likes big data, and I think he brings up a really interesting point. Well, I know Chris does. We know Chris likes big data, and he cannot lie. Y'all. So, and give me a backbeat. But I think there's something to that. Okay, Kerry, you want to come on. There's something really important to that because the data tells a story, and as somebody who looks at numbers and it's like, what's the story being told here? And I know Chris and Katie, I'm sure you feel the same way. It's like, what is it saying? What is the story? We have to understand the data to get to that story. So I find it interesting that marketers have this love-hate relationship with data. And maybe it's because we've just put too much at its feet and burdened it and thought of it as the promised land. And maybe we've just set expectations that were too high for our relationship.
Well, I think that's fair. But I think there's different flavors of marketers. And I think that saying marketers in general, that's too broad. It's like it's too broad stroke of, what the job entails. So Chris and I, in one of our previous roles, were marketing technologists, for example. So we had people on the team who were a little bit more of that traditional creative marketer wanting to create like the campaigns. And then you had myself and Chris who were more of the back end, the data, the programming. And so I think it's unfair to say all marketers hate data, but I think a good chunk of them probably do. Unless you really know what you're doing, data can be very daunting.
Yeah.
They don't like data because it doesn't always say what they want it to say.
Well, there's that too. There's that.
The other thing I think is important is that there's a ladder of success to analytics, and most people are still on the bottom rung. So it's 5 steps, right? 5 ladder rungs. The first is descriptive analytics. Like, what happened? We've seen a whole bunch of companies that are still struggling with what happened. Like, can we even find the data? The second rung is diagnostic. Why did those things happen? Why did site visits go up 40%? Why did nobody fill out a form yesterday? And those are questions that marketers really struggle with. They're not very good at that because in a lot of cases it requires some qualitative data too. And for people like me, where you have to go talk to another human being, it's like, I don't want to do that.
That's why I'm here, by the way.
Exactly. The third layer.
Yeah,
exactly. So the third layer is predictive. So if you know what happened and you know why, like we know that site visits went up 40% yesterday because people were searching for the term predictive analytics. then predictive is the third piece. What's going to happen next? And that's where we're trying to nudge people to go, and it's a push because people aren't ready for that. They're still stuck at what. And then there's two more rungs above that, which nobody's at, which is prescriptive analytics. What should we do? Okay, we know what's going to happen. What should we do about it? And finally, is proactive, where this machine learning stuff is. It's like, can you get a machine to do this for you so that you don't have to anymore? But it's like a regular ladder. Every rung is contingent upon success in the previous rung. So if you're still trying to find your data, you're not doing anything else.
Yeah. Where's my data? Well, and I can see that because I think going back to sort of, big data, which always made me laugh because I really talked to a lot of companies back when it was the thing. And so many companies really didn't understand how to really implement it. So the question then becomes is, where do you think we're at in sort of even that base rung? I mean, do you think most companies are still at the bottom of that ladder looking up going, how do I get to that top rung? Are they there? You looking at that? Yeah.
It's worse. I think executives are saying, why aren't you at the top rung yet? And everyone else is like, because we can't find the ladder.
With two hands and a flashlight.
I think it's the next series after Who Moved My Cheese is Who Moved My Ladder? Where's my ladder? Exactly. Yeah, no, I think that's funny. Yeah.
Well, part of the problem
That's sad.
It's the organizational structure because they keep hiring the same types of roles. So you keep hiring, junior marketer after junior marketer. What you really need is an actual data analyst or a data scientist in order to keep moving you forward. So having diversified skill sets within your marketing team is really what's going to keep moving you up those rungs. That's what Chris and I were able to identify was going to really work for us, was diversified skills versus both of us. I am not a data scientist by any stretch of the imagination. I basically push the buttons that Chris tells me to push. But, it works because then I can see it from a different lens.
Yeah. Well, and that's really an important point because it seems like one of the things that if you look at like the professions that are growing where there's a lot of job demand is data scientists. And part of it is it's maybe the training hasn't caught up to the demand. So there's such this demand out there, but until companies can hire that, there hasn't really been a lot of programs, and it's still fairly new in business schools and graduate programs to actually produce more people who think like that, who then have the tools to then fill these jobs. And so maybe we're sort of at this gap. It's a really interesting kind of gap where the demand's there and the supply and the ability, just isn't there. I'm no data scientist either. I mean, I know enough to be very dangerous. Like
I think there's one of those here.
And I'm not going to say who it is, Chris.
The name rhymes with when. Like when you need a data scientist, there's only one person out of these four that you should call.
No, you should not call me. Who are you going to call? Not Kathy. That's who.
I'm not even sure that demand has caught up yet. I don't know if everybody realizes that they need a data scientist or that they need somebody with data expertise on their team. They're still kind of like, I have Google Analytics. I can run a report or something. We'll figure it out.
And
We're going to skip a generation. What's going to happen is that machine learning, and particularly deep learning, is going to skip a generation where companies that come in later will pay a lot more for these systems, but these systems will do a lot of the heavy lifting for us because you're right. The total, I forget where the stat came from, but it was a 2016 stat that said there are a total of 8,000 qualified data scientists in the United States with 4 years or more of experience, and there are 13,500 marine biologists. So more people know about whales than data science.
Wow.
And so what you see a lot of big companies, Google and Apple, IBM, Microsoft, and Amazon, they're building these tools that will essentially do a lot of the heavy data science lifting for you because we're not going to get the people, but the companies want the ROI, they want the results now. I was at IBM Think a couple weeks ago now, their big tech show, and they showed off this new tool called Watson Studio, and it used to be setting up a deep learning system was really, really complicated. Katie and I had at our old office I had a chart on the wall of where I was in the learning of these different techniques. And I'm like, I'm a quarter of the way down the chart and like, this sucks. And I know how important it is. And I get to think and like, yeah, try out Watson Studio. Log in. I was like, oh, look, you took that entire chart and made it drag and drop. So I can just rip up the chart now because I don't have to write that code anymore. And now I can focus on the architecture of the system, just dropping little colored blocks on the screen. But that creates an artificial intelligence. So the tools are accelerating so much faster than the human beings, which is par for the course.
Has the offer come in yet to upload you to the Matrix?
No, but when it does, I'm ready because I would love to take over the world's computers.
We're holding out for a higher bidder.
I think that would be cool, given what's happening with Facebook, and that brings me to, I think it would be cool to have a Chris Matrix. Like, that's awesome. That would be super awesome. But it sort of begs the question, where we do have this gap and we have tools, and everybody wants to have the revenue stream, even though the understanding and the human profession hasn't caught up with it. I think the other factor is just the misunderstanding, the lack of preparedness, lack of sort of knowledge about what this stuff could be or should be. And just even I'm watching, if you watched any of the Facebook hearings, it was pretty laughable. I mean, you guys, it's comedy.
Senator, we run ads.
I mean,
breaking news.
Oh my God, it reminded me of trying to explain Skype to my grandma. And I was like, none of this is working. But it is comical, but in an interesting way. I think the lack of trust, the lack of understanding, the fear, and maybe part of it's just this misunderstanding. I think those of us who come from some background in data and tech know that, look, people are collecting information on you. This is just the new reality that we're in. And by the way, Alexa and Echo got news for you, is recording you. And I mean, we're in this really interesting time. I mean, do you think that fear will magnify or delay or in any way sort of impede this adoption of tools and better understanding, or do you see it as an opportunity?
I can sort of jump in, and then Chris, I know you have the wheels spinning, but I think it depends on what generation you're talking to. I can't remember the exact meme or whatever it was that I saw on the internet, but it was sort of back in my day, we were always worried about Big Brother wiretapping, and now we're like, hey, wiretap, can you order me some cookies? So it depends. I think it depends on the generation, because a lot of kids,
That's funny.
they've grown up and they don't know it's different.
Yeah.
It's true. We had a lot of Gen Zers actually covering the Adobe Summit. I just went out to the Adobe Summit and there's a whole team, and they said privacy is an old person problem. They don't care.
Yeah.
They've never had it and they don't care. And of course I was like, well, someday you're going to care.
Right.
Because something that somebody's going to cross a line and you'll be like, wait a second, that's private. It would be like your credit card information. If you gave it to one waiter at one restaurant, that doesn't mean you're like, hey, world, use my credit card information. There's going to be something. They just haven't found there's something.
Right.
I've heard privacy described in the modern era not as the absence of people having data on you, but your control over who sees what. And I think that's probably the more modern interpretation there. But in terms of impeding our abilities or a market opportunity and stuff, what's likely to happen is what's already happened in Europe. We were talking about this morning and last night with the General Data Protection Regulation, aka GDPR. This is a big deal. Yesterday, Google sent out emails to all Google Analytics users saying, here's how we have implemented GDPR requirements in your software. You got to go in and fix them and do the things that you need to do for your company to make it compliant. We gave you the tools. You have to go do the thing. And my inbox this morning was like, does anyone know what this thing means? Over and over again. So I recorded a video this morning just on the basics of it. But that regulation came about because companies couldn't self-police, and because Europe as a society, or as a collection of societies, is much better about the rights of the individual than America, where the rights of the corporation tend to take precedence. However, what's really clever about GDPR is that it's extraterritorial, which means that now every company on the planet has to implement at least some part of it if they get any web traffic or social media traffic or anything from the physical EU location, which is pretty much anybody who has more than 10 visitors to their website.
Wow.
And it's a good thing in the long term because it's a massive market opportunity for companies to do privacy correctly and well, and to treat the consumer as equal to the corporation in interest. And so companies that pivot and figure this out and put people first will do better.
It's such
in the
a
short term, somebody's getting fined, though, right?
Somebody's getting fined. Yeah. Well, you know,
it's only 4% of your annual revenue.
Well,
or 10 million pounds, right?
20.
Whichever is
20.
Fuck.
Yeah. That's
well, if you split it between there's two of you, so
there you go. Well, you know, it's interesting that we're this whole new world, because at least in Europe, it seems like they're so much further ahead in thinking about these things, because we still have over here such a gap between people who understand the technology and then people who are legislating it. Like there is there's like a gap. I mean, I don't know how else to put it.
What? No, there's not.
I'm just going to say it. It's like talking to my grandma. And it's just scary because we've got people who don't understand any of these things legislating it. And all of us could see the palpable irony of Congress talking about trust and transparency, and everyone's going, "Are you kidding me? Are you for reals? Like, is this happening? What? Ooga. Like, we're all just like laughing at it. But it is an interesting kind of thing. And
it's not even just Congress. There's a lot of marketers that don't know where their data even is. Like they just plug in a third-party solution and import all the stuff, and they don't even know that stuff's they've customer data sitting out there on some database, and they're like, "What? That's not ours."
And add to it, and I know Chris probably spends a lot of time thinking about this. Add to it, and Katie, you probably do as well. It's like we factor in the idea that how secure is cloud storage, and who has it, and who has access to it, and where is your data? Because cloud is not the perfect, most secure way to even store data, and and my head explodes because it's just so evolved from like when we were kids. Like there wasn't even YouTube. We did stupid stuff. It was never, saved for posterity. Now
we
it's
can still deny it.
Still deny it. And now
it's my saving grace in life, honestly.
Right? Can and do. I'm like, no, that wasn't me.
I am so lucky because I would never be able to run for Congress ever. but the Gen Z, they know they're being recorded. And just even this adoption of like Alexa and Echo, and knowing that stuff, Amazon knows what you're doing and saying, and they're okay with that. And it's a really interesting kind of time that they're growing up in. And if they're
okay with it now, but I promise you, there's going to come a time when they realize. I mean, not like all of them are the same, by the way, but it's going to take something like a watershed moment for them to be like, "Oh, I didn't realize like that." Was going to get out there.
I think, though, that the fact that it is ubiquitous will, in the long term, be a good thing because it will require us to be more tolerant and accepting of people's flaws. Because guess what? Everyone will have them, and they're all on YouTube. And I mean,
yay! Oh God, no!
Penn 2020.
I'm ineligible. I was not born in the United States. Which is, I think, fortunate for everyone. But that actually does raise, and I risk touching the third rail here, but what's happening in DC now, and with who sits in the Oval Office now and things, does change the expectations of what is and is not acceptable, and what and that's a person who has been in the media eye for his entire career. And obviously, a lot of this older media is coming back to remind him of his previous misadventures. But extrapolate that to the future, where all of everybody's stuff is out there in public or semi-public. And even if your stuff isn't, the ring of people around you, we just found this out with the Cambridge Analytica. They're like, hey, which of your friends was smart? Which of your friends was dumb? And shit.
It's such a relief, though. So many people in our circle were smart, at least in that context.
I think it's more just we're all so damn busy we didn't have time to play some stupid quiz app.
That too.
But we see this also culturally happening with things like, gay rights and equal pay for women and stuff, where these are, because we are accepting of people as who they are. In the long run, I think, we win as a civilization. We win if we can accept something like, yeah, you have this or that, or you are this or that, and that's okay. You can still be an effective legislator. You can still be an effective CEO, and so on and so forth. It'll be a painful transition to get there, but I think at the end result, it'll be worth it.
It's fascinating to think about. It really is. Do you vision a time where perhaps, speaking of these big social issues, where maybe the data could be used by organizations to look at things like the pay gap and sort of rectify past biases and use that in their hiring practices, and maybe better data to weed out unconscious bias or explicit bias?
I think optimistically, yes. Realistically, not for a long time.
Because people be stupid.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think, you have at least 2 generations of folks that need to cycle out before those changes, cycle out.
Waiting on you to die, .org.
Katie said it in the nicest way. I'd be all, the asses need to go. And Katie's like, how much nicer way.
Again, this is why I'm the human side of the company. No, I think, you have, the baby boomers and then the generation behind them. They're the ones who are, again, sort of like privacy is their issue according to Gen Z. So it's their issue. So they're the ones who have to cycle out first in order, I think, this is my opinion, in order for the people to be open to making those changes. As 75% of us on this show know, our gender is a big problem in terms of getting ahead for no other reason other than it's literally what our chromosomes are. And, Chris and I have debated this a lot, not in a, we don't see eye to eye, but it's just one of those things that every once in a while, it kind of catches you off guard of like, did that really just happen because of my gender, because of my hair color, because of my height, because of my race, because of this, that, whatever. And I want to be optimistic and say that, the data is going to play a big part in changing those things, but I don't see that happening for a long time, unfortunately.
There's a greater risk too in that the way machine learning works, you have training data and you have test data, production data.
Oh, yeah.
The training data is our legacy. Our societal training data is corrupted because we have these biases already.
Yeah.
There was an example that was in ProPublica of a police department that attempted to build a predictive algorithm for who would re-offend. It was 20% right. You'd be better off literally flipping a coin. But it predicted African Americans would re-offend at 5 times the rate of Caucasians because someone built their biases into the data. That's the explicit bias that you can spot pretty easily. There's a greater challenge in machine level implicit bias. So let's say, Kathy, you're going to apply for a job. And I'm going to use a machine learning algorithm to decide whether or not to consider your LinkedIn profile. I tell the machine, I explicitly disallow age. I explicitly disallow gender. I explicitly disallow ethnicity and say those things are not, you may not make a decision based on that. But if I've pulled in all this data and you like a certain type of magazine and a certain type of book and a certain type of movie and a certain type of music, I can infer your gender with about 99.9% accuracy because there are these weak associations. And if the machine does that, it may still produce a model that says you're probably female and therefore I'm going to pay you 20% less or whatever the algorithm is that we program into this. So we have, and it will be a career, this will be a legitimate career for a while. People who are essentially model and machine inspectors to say that is not the outcome we want. We want a fair outcome. So given this talent pool, 50% of the applicants should be female, right? Given this talent pool, 50% of the hires should be female, or 17.9% should be African American. And so you have to build into the systems quality checks along the way. I remember I used to work at a company in Atlanta, and it was a gender diverse workplace, but there was not a single African American on staff. And I'm like, we're in Atlanta, 82% of the population is African American. You have a hiring problem. And they're like, no, there's no problem. Look around you.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
Denial.
Exactly. Well, that's really interesting because, I've been reading a lot about nerding out a lot on a lot of these sort of the concern about, to your point, about machine learning and dragging past biases and projecting them into the future with designs and not just the data that we're carrying over, but the designers. And I think to Katie's point, some of these designers bring in their bias, their implicit or unconscious bias need to sort of term out, hit their term limits. I don't know what a nicer way to put it. Cycle out, cycle through.
Cycle out.
Thanks for your service. Yeah.
Like when people buy a pet parrot without realizing how long they live.
That's right. It's like, exactly. In unconscious bias years, you've termed out. Bye-bye. But then there's the data, which is really interesting because I still remember back in the day where voice recognition technology, and I think Kerry's heard me give this story where, so I got a hold of, I was one of the sort of beta testers for a lot of the early Kurzweil stuff. And like it was really crappy technology because of just where technology was. But it was like 10 times worse for women because the way it was modeled was based on male octave ranges. And women have very different ranges. And so the guys would be testing it, and I was at Gartner, and they'd be like, oh, this works, half the time. And I was like, I tried to order Keflex, and it's like, do you want flow days? I did not say flow days. What are you saying? And
at least it didn't say Kotex. It wasn't sexist. It just didn't hear you.
It's like, speak up, miss. Yeah.
But
it was like, I had like a 3% hit rate. And I was like, what is up with that? And
I got news for you. That still happens.
It still happens. But
don't say the A name.
It's gotten a little better, but there's still that stuff. There's still the issue of, the DMV and passports where they use, Asian males and it couldn't read. It was rejecting a lot of these passport photos because it was based on the eyes open rate for Caucasian males. And, we have these biases in systems. And I think that's such a big point that you bring up. And yeah, I'm hoping that through data and also different designers, and we can start to get rid of some of these things. Or at least lessen it, because women, tech has a woman problem. Katie was very nice about it. 3/4 of the panel here knows it. Everybody knows
4/4
it.
of the panel knows it.
To be fair,
Actually, everybody knows it. Well, I shouldn't say that. Let me backpedal. Everybody knows it. I think 3 of us have experienced it firsthand in ways that maybe Chris has not personally. That's what I meant.
No, I just get the racist stuff.
But yeah, you get the racist stuff. You get the racist stuff. I'm sure you do. I'm sure you totally do. And we've all experienced what that what that feels like. And so if we can sort of use data to get better to that, I think that would be a phenomenal kind of thing,
Do you worry at all that we're going to get to the point where people are able to buy more privacy or at least screen their data, by opting for premium options for things, whereas people who don't have the money to buy Facebook, if it were something you could buy without the data collection, they can't, but they still want to use it. So you're trading your privacy off.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we'll be at that point because my much greater fear, and I think is a more imminent fear, is that as our legislators so capably demonstrated, they don't understand it, but they are theoretically in charge of it. And it is a very short path to a totalitarian state using these tools. You are already, with or without consent, tracked everywhere you go within the northeast of the United States because we have these, easy toll readers, which also take a picture of every single license plate that goes under them. Wow. And so even if you did not want to opt into the Easy Pass system, you have no other option except to not drive on those roads at all. Everywhere you go, there are CCTV cameras that are recording you. So you are already living in a functional surveillance state. And the amusing thing is that we volunteer for it. We just take pictures of ourselves and hand them over to these companies.
Yeah.
But it is not particularly difficult to reuse these techniques, these data stores, et cetera, for enforcing a point of view that promotes your one set of interests.
Well, I think the other frightening thing, sort of back to a point, Kerry, that you had made earlier about, well, that's not what the data said, or, it's not saying what I want it to. I think part of what's going to happen, to Chris's whole point about the historical data being biased, is people are just going to accept that, well, but that's what the data says. I'm not going to change it because the data says what the data says. And I think that it's going to take a very unique set of skills and an open mind in order to say, you know what, I think the data is wrong. And I think that
or to at least understand that the sample it was based on was biased, to your point.
Well,
and I think that's going to be hard.
Yeah.
I think there's a greater danger there too, Katie, which is you're assuming people are rational. Right now, we have some guy who's saying, that's fake news. I disagree with it, or it's critical of me. That's fake news. And you don't even need facts anymore. You just need to have a louder opinion than someone else. And
Alternative facts.
Alternative facts. And so when you have that as part of the culture, it's like, does the data even matter? Like, they wouldn't even listen to the data. Like, literally, it says this happened, and somebody's like, fake news.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you take it back down to a smaller, safer scale, let's go back to like the marketer example.
When you're not trying to blow stuff up.
Right, exactly. We see that within companies where, we'll hand them a set of data and say, this is what happened. And even though it's like all of their data, all of the facts, they'll still look at us and say, no, that's not what happened. I still want to, I still want to blitz and go left when we're actually, you need to go right. So even at that small scale, like Chris, your example was spot on, but I'm just going to bring it down to a safe place again and talk about the marketers.
This is fascinating to me. And Chris, I love that you said that, because I think we talked at Social Media Marketing World very briefly, and Predictably Irrational, how much we love that book by Dan Ariely. And it gets to this point that we're talking about, which is we can have all the data in the world and we're marketing machine learning as if we just have the facts and the data. But if human beings don't value that, are we really going to act on the data? And I'm fascinated by this really human problem, because I think there's an assumption that if we just had data, humans would act on the data. And my God, I'm with you, Chris. You bring up this amazing point. It's like, no, we're weird. We will rationalize. And it's kind of this interesting conundrum, because I think even if we had all this data, and Katie, you're pointing out, both of you are pointing out this really amazing point that you yourselves have delivered data to clients, and some of them are like, nope. And that's an interesting dilemma. I don't even know where to go with that. Holy cow.
I think psychology.
Yeah. Brainwashing.
God.
But we all do it as humans to a certain extent. I was doing a podcast last week, and the example I gave was, I have a Fitbit, and the Fitbit collects data on me every single day, but I hardly ever look at it. I know if I walked more, then I would feel better. And that's what the data is telling me. The data is telling me I'm not walking enough, but I choose to ignore it because it's the path of least resistance. And, that and some laziness. Totally,
I get it. No, it's the classic knowing doing gap, right? You've heard the knowing doing gap, right? We know what to do, we don't do it. So I think there's always going to be some of that human and sort of part of it. But let's talk about dark data, because I want to yes, let's talk about dark data.
I thought you said dark data for a second. I'm like, that is bitch and villain name. Dark data.
That's kind of cool. That would be actually cool and very millennial.
I call that.
Okay, you did call it. That's awesome. I love that you guys say that you light up dark data. So first of all, tell us what dark data is, and how do you bring it into the light? How do you get it to crossover? How do you get it to crossover into the light? How do you score some? And
how much is it going to cost me?
Hold on, could you go really slowly? Did you?
We're just going to write this down for edification.
Because a friend wants to know.
Really?
It's fun. The way that it's positioned, it does sound like this ominous, scary, mysterious thing that you can't get your hands on. But it's very easy to get on the street, believe it or not. Everybody has some. Look, ask your friend; they have some. No, I mean the thing is, so dark data is essentially data that you're collecting that you're not using. So for me personally, my Fitbit data is dark data because I'm collecting it, but I'm not using it. I'm not doing anything actionable with it. And I think that that's part of what Chris and I want to be able to do is demystify this thing. So everyone's running around screaming dark data, but it's not a mysterious thing. It's just data that you're sitting on that you're not using and making actionable. And you could probably do a lot more with it and make more money. Back at the old shop, Chris and I were working with a medical device company, and they were sitting on a lot of CRM data that they just hadn't looked at in a long time, and it got lost. And it turns out, I forget the exact number, Chris, but
it was $1.5 billion
in potential revenue that they just hadn't chased down because they forgot about it.
It literally got lost in the system.
Okay.
That's dark data.
You didn't do a Superman 2 on that?
Wow.
I mean, I thought about it.
That's crazy to me. Yeah. Well, and there's an assumption that, like, some of that stuff is valuable, and I'm sure some of it is, and some of it, like, I don't think there's any. I don't know that. I guess all my Fitbit data is dark data, but I think there's anything that interesting in there.
It's interesting to you personally as the end user. So, like, you're the client of your Fitbit. I think part of it is sort of back to your point about big data. There was this movement of big data. Everyone's running around screaming big data, big data. And so they just start collecting everything they possibly can.
Right.
But they don't know what to do with it. And that's sort of where the skill gap of data scientists and analysts come in. Because you've collected these giant databases, as you can see by my gestures, the giant databases.
The scale. Are they to scale?
So this is little data. This is big data.
Big data.
It's like medium data.
Exactly. Yes. So this is where you want to be. But they've collected.
And this is dark data.
Yeah.
And so they just don't know what to do with all of the data they've collected.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll have less dark data, though, now with GDPR? Because you're required to have a reason for collecting data.
And to catalog, and that will be part of it. We did a paper we just released this morning, actually, on data that was it was about a company. It's about Olive Garden. And this was 2,572 Glassdoor reviews of current and former employees. This data was sitting there, right? And I'm sure somebody in HR is probably looking at it every now and again, but they're not, even though they know about it, even though it's technically, not like locked in a drawer somewhere, they're probably not using it and extracting information out of it. So one of the things we found in there was there's the usual complaints about, like, pay, hours, etc. But the thing that stuck out to us when we started running models on is soup, salad, breadsticks. Why does this keep coming up over and over and over again? It turns out the unlimited soup, salad, and breadsticks dish for what, $7.99. The employees they fucking hate that dish because they literally say, "I am a breadstick slave. All I do is get breadsticks."
Are you kidding me? That's all I want. I need to go work for Olive Garden.
You are the problem. You are the problem.
No,
I can't eat any more food by the time they bring it because I ate all the breadsticks.
Well, see, that's because their service is so crappy. It's like they say, we treat you like family. Yeah, my family sucks.
Right? You'll get nothing and like it.
Exactly. My family hates me. That's why the service is so bad. Like an hour later, and so you're filling up all breadsticks. So, but yes, that's that.
The joke's on those guys now because they'll be like, you know what? Fine, no more free breadsticks for you.
That's it. And I'm gonna get all up in their grill and
yeah, there's gonna be a revolution.
There is, and I'm going to tell them about dark data, and I'm going to say, look, I know all about your dark data, and I know about your breadsticks, bitches. I know.
If those employees don't want the breadsticks, I'll take them. Stop your bitching.
That's hilarious, but when you say that, Chris, it makes so much sense that they would hate that. God, that makes too much sense. Mm-hmm. Should I have more compassion for them? I don't know.
That's a human decision. I'll leave that to you. But
they're whining.
But that's an example of this is data. This is dark data in the sense that you're not using it to its maximum impact. You're not extracting the business value out of it. It's just kind of there. And it, for some companies, that's like a thorn in their side. They just don't even want to pretend. They just want to pretend Glassdoor doesn't even exist instead of using it as a source of insights. Now, if you have that insight and you choose strategically not to do something with it, that's different than just putting your hands over your ears and saying, "I can't hear you." And companies are sitting on tons of this stuff.
Yeah, it's like, exactly. But you know what? The margins on those breadsticks, I bet they're just out of this world. Like the margins, because it's cheap, right? Carbohydrates. So it's like a bitch all about the breadsticks. It's like you're making margins. Maybe your service here is really faster. I'm still hung up on that.
I want breadsticks. Thanks a lot, Chris.
You're welcome. Happy to help.
Well, and I think the other thing about dark data that's often misunderstood is that unused data is not the same as unstructured or unreadable data. And I think that that's sort of a big distinction that we also want to clarify. And so unstructured data, such as qualitative data, is not the same as dark data, which is often qualitative and quantitative data. And so I think that there's a misunderstanding about what dark data really is. And so at a very basic level, not scary at all, dark data is just data that you have that you're not using to make actionable.
This is a book. It's Monty Python's Flying Circus.
I think that's what that is.
This is unstructured data, right? It's text and words. Now, if I lock this in a drawer and don't use it, then it's dark data. But just because it's unstructured doesn't mean I don't get enormous joy from it.
You just did a Schrodinger's cat version of dark data and blew my mind. Is it really dark data if it's locked up and I can't see it? I don't know, Chris.
Trouble at the middle.
Now it seems like as good a time as any for companies to think about what they have anyway, right? Because they have to clean house and start over. With full permission, double opt-ins and all that.
Well, and it's an interesting thing too, because it seems like some of the data is, please correct me because I'm not familiar with your terms and language. It's like some of it might not be accessible in a way that would even be beneficial, right? So it's not maybe unstructured and you can't really do anything. And so how much of it is really dark because they don't know what to do with it, but if they could use it because it's in a way that makes sense. And how much of it is just it's a mess, and it's not in a way they could even access it, and that's why they don't use it.
What?
It's a mix. It's a mix.
What?
I'm glad you got it, Chris. I was like,
I don't have your language.
I went 3 bends with you and then went off the trail.
If it's not, well, you understand what I'm saying, Katie, right?
Chris got it. Let's just listen.
I got you. So it is, as Chris said, it's a mix because on the one hand, you could be collecting all of your data in one single system and just not looking at it. But then what we actually often see is companies buying multiple different solutions, third-party solutions, building solutions, proprietary solutions, and none of those databases talk to each other. And that's really what it comes down to, that we see the challenge is that their tech stack has gotten so big that they don't even know how to piece the different databases together to tell a story about their customer. Chris, you're nodding along.
Everybody wants to talk about the size of their tech stack, like it,
Just remember,
how you use it.
Big data.
It's the new big data. It's the new guy big data. It's like, hey, is that big data in your pants? It's the new big tech stack. Would you like to see my tech stack?
You can't handle my tech stack.
No, HR for you.
Yellow flag.
Exactly.
Think about it like ingredients, right? So your data is essentially your ingredients, and then all of your tools, all your technologies are like the ingredients, the things you cook with, all your utensils and things in your kitchen. If you have lots of utensils and you have ingredients, but you don't know how to cook, all this stuff is meaningless, right? So likewise, if you have the ingredients, but they're in different parts of your house and you have no idea where anything is, you're still not having dinner. If your tools suck,
anybody else disturbed by Chris just has a giant knife?
I think I'm so used to it at this point, which is definitely saying something.
Oh my.
I'm gonna go get my machete.
That's over that corner. But no,
sorry, continue.
it's so you have the tools, you have the ingredients, and there's still, like, do you know how to cook? We will refer to as people process platform, right? So you have all this conversation about data and technology and platform and stuff, but if you still can't cook, or you have people who at your company are actively standing in the way of you trying to cook, you're not going to get anything done. And that's one of the reasons why we approach things the way we do. It's not just the technology. If you think it's all about just how much more technology and money can I throw at this, but you ignore process and you ignore people, you're still not eating.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. You know, what's really interesting too, as you were talking, I can see so many applications beyond just, tech and customers and all that stuff, and Olive Garden, and I mean at Olive Garden, get better with your service. I look at something like the war on cancer, and I heard Joe Biden talk about this at South by last year, and there's all these like databases that don't talk to each other, and the models are not connected. And how much are we replicating and reinventing the wheel? And could we really make discoveries quicker and hasten that cycle for cures if we just have what you were describing, where these databases are connected and talking to each other? And that's sort of what you're describing is what he was envisioning and what he was proposing. And I think that to me could be that's where I think the promise of this stuff could really, CRM is important, blah, blah, blah. But the humanity aspect, like the story of like how you help humanity with data, that to me is like, when I think about predictive analytics and how data helps, I think about the hierarchy of humanity, and I go, that's where data could really, that could be so amazing, We
are very close to that. We are very, very close to that already. So IBM has its Watson oncology team, and it is diagnosing cancers at a faster rate and a more accurate rate than ever before. But even in the pharmaceutical space, there's something fascinating happening right now. There's this, computer vision, the ability for computers to do image recognition. We use it for silly stuff like, hey, I'm going to use this to make silly faces on Snapchat, right? That's an amusing application. But in pharma, what they've done is, in the past, you've had to do very, very limited drug trials, like run a bunch of tests, look at the results and stuff like that, and go back and forth. Now, with machine learning and computer vision, they can put out a palette of 1 million test samples and test every possible variation of a drug at 1 million times all at once, and use computer vision to say, samples 254, 118, and 277, 174. Those ones show a difference. Let's pull those out. And so you can now iterate through drugs so much faster than you used to be able to because of machine learning and AI. So the issue will not be whether the technology will get us there, because it will, and it will within our natural lifetimes. I firmly believe we will completely solve cancer within our natural lifetimes. The issue will be the income inequality and structural issues with our society that will permit you access to those medical cures or not.
Bingo. That well said. We got to work on a lot of those, solving a lot of those challenges to be able to really fulfill the, I think, promise of data and AI and machine learning. But smart people like you guys are gonna, I think, help figure this out. Is there like a Nobel Prize for like data analytics? Because it seems like, there should be, because that could solve so many problems.
Nobel Prize if you use it for something that helps humanity.
Yes, exactly.
The data is not the important part. It's what you'll get the Nobel in medicine if you fix cancer.
Well, that's true. But without the data, I think,
or breadsticks.
Or the breadsticks.
Either of the world's great challenges.
You got to have carbs. You got to carbo load to do your scientific work. It's very important. But it seems like you need the data with all these. If you can cure cancer, but without the data, you need the data to be able to do that. And so it just seems like
We are, but we're getting faster at that too. At Social Media Marketing World, I sat on the bus ride over to the aircraft carrier next to a woman who works at a genomics shop, and she said, here's how. I said, how fast are we getting at sequencing a genome, cost-wise and time-wise? And she said, every 2 years we're removing a zero. She said it used to cost $1 million and like months to sequence a genome. She said we're down to about $1,000 now to fully sequence an individual human genome, and I think she said about 10 hours to fully sequence a genome now, end to end. And so within the next couple of years, we will reduce that to something. You'll be able to, instead of ordering the silly little thing from one of the genetic services. You'll say, sequence my entire genome for me. Here's my $50. And now you'll have this massive explosion of good medical data to work with that in turn will accelerate how fast you can cure things. Because if I have every single genome, on the planet, and I know you have this condition, you have this condition, you have this condition, with machine learning and AI, I can pull all the data out and say, I'm pretty sure this DUX4 gene is exactly what causes this particular brand of muscular dystrophy. We go in, we fix that, problem solved. Use CRISPR, cut it out, edit, and now we've solved that person.
Yeah.
Solve that person. And Jamba Juice could engineer me the perfect smoothie based on my DNA.
It could. Or, Olive Garden might have like a custom breadstick just for you.
Just keep it coming. You don't change a thing.
They better. I'm telling you. Promise.
Just turn off like the thing that turns carbs to fat.
True.
For me.
Turn that
off. My genome.
Turn that off. Although there's the interesting thing now of like a company came forward, I think a few years ago, and tried to say that they owned the rights to the genetic data. And then your data is somewhere out there, your genetic data, and it's your data. I mean, it's your genetic imprint. And I forget who it was, but there's been, I think, multiple companies that have tried to say that's our data and we have a patent on that data. And it's like, what? How is that possible? That's somebody's genetic coding. How do you have a patent on that?
Well, China and Europe will fix that because Europe, as we know, favors the rights of the individual over the corporation. And at least in its current incarnation, China doesn't give a shit about your intellectual property rights. And so,
really? I mean, they do to the extent that they can benefit from them.
They do. Yeah.
So maybe you'll have like the company saying patent over here, and then just go to Alibaba and buy the cancer cure for like $10, and you get like a free stress ball with it.
Yeah.
I remember that happening though. There was like a test subject or something, and use of an experimentation on their DNA resulted in really valuable findings, and so they were like, we own this DNA now. And it's like,
no, back away.
I mean, like when I reproduce, I have to pay you a royalty fee or something. I don't know. Because half of it's 7 alleles in common, so I got to pay like the ratio.
That's right. You have to pay more for being female, right? So
that's right.
Haircuts, laundry, and your own genetic
That's
DNA.
what I'll tell them. I'll give you 70 cents on the dollar.
That's right. That's right.
It is a girl.
That's right. I make less, therefore, in theory, I should pay more. I mean, less. I should pay less.
Yeah, that's right.
For that differential.
It's fair.
What's one big thought? I mean, we're having fun, and this is really some interesting stuff that we're on the cusp of, and you two are seeing a lot of really cool things. Like, what's one big takeaway or thought you would leave people with about maybe what you guys do or where you see this whole kind of thing evolving?
Chris, what do you got?
All right. There's 3 outcomes that we generally look at, and 2 of them are improbable. And this is for AI machine learning in general. The first outcome is the Star Trek future, where everything is perfect. We have absolutely no absence of anything important, and we just wear really uncomfortable spandex clothes all day long. That's the Star Trek future. Right? No poverty. Poverty's been eradicated. That's probably unlikely.
I get the Deanna Troy outfit.
You enjoy that. The second is Skynet, right, where the Terminators and stuff like that, and the machines eradicate us, and that's also pretty unlikely, at least not until you get to a sentient general purpose AI, and that's still a ways away. The third outcome, which I think is probably most likely because it embraces our humanity, is Elysium, where you have the movie Elysium with Matt Damon, which is an excellent movie, where you have an elite that benefit from all of the concentration of intellectual property and therefore the concentration of wealth. And then you have an entire irradiated planet where people who are not quite so lucky basically don't ever make it past their 40th birthday. And that, unfortunately, I think is probably the most likely outcome because of the way humans work. For good or ill, we're not real good at fairness. We are not real good at finding commonalities instead of finding differences. And so I think that's the long-term future. For more immediate applicability, almost every analytics problem that you have as a company is solvable now. You can find some solution to it. It may not be perfect. It may not be that golden unification, one magical thing. There still are no silver bullets. And silver is a terrible metal to make bullets out of anyway. But every challenge you have can be addressed to some degree with the tools that are available now. And most of the tools that we work with on a day-to-day basis have zero financial cost. They're open source tools. And so it's just developing the skill, the willingness to learn, the capabilities. And then these capabilities that we have, you can have too.
Yeah.
Learn Python. I told you. Could have saved you the hour.
Yeah. Yeah. But Chris makes it sound elegant, and I like that.
Sounds great.
It does. Katie, what do you think? Any kind of final thoughts? And
I haven't envisioned 3 different versions of the world at this point in my life. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm going to eat for dinner, but
breadsticks.
Done. Food.
If you want fast service, don't go to Olive Garden.
Check.
I think the big thing, and Chris was just touching on this, is that, don't be afraid of the data. And I think that that's sort of the MO of a lot of bigger companies right now, is they're afraid of what the data is going to tell them. So they just stay the course they've always been going and just sort of like, duck and cover and hope and pray for the best. But, it's not a scary thing. You don't have to change everything all at once. You can make small iterative changes. Just don't be afraid to look at your data. Yeah. And I think that that's sort of what Chris and I are trying to bring to the table is, we can look at all of your data. We can look a little bit of your data. We can look at a medium size of your data, and we can make it actionable and help you start to make small incremental changes that don't feel like you're just completely turning everything in a 180.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's really interesting. We had a fun discussion about data. It wasn't boring at all. It's very, very interesting. And what are you guys working on, or where do you want to send people who watch this for more information? Where should they go? How can they find you, Chris and Katie? Where can they find you?
You can find our website at braintrustinsights.com, at Trust Insights and most of the social networks that are not under federal investigation. You can find me personally at ChristopherSPenn.com and at CSPenn, again, on most of the social networks except the ones that are boring.
And you can find me at Katie Lioy, just plain and simple.
It is plain and simple. And Kerry, where can people find you?
At Kerry Gorgone, everywhere fine people are found. And Marketing Profs podcast, which is marketingprofs.com.
And apparently Olive Garden. And after
oh my God, Olive Garden in about 20 minutes.
And after they see this, I'll never be invited back. But that's
and after I get my food, it'll be 3 hours and 20 minutes.
Just do curbside pickup, you'll be all set.
Exactly.
No way. You get so shafted. You get the soggy breadsticks.
No,
I'm not going to be fobbed off on some crappy lukewarm breadstick.
It's true. If I wanted really crappy service, bad conversation, and to be really angry, I would just do Thanksgiving dinner every day at my house. I don't have to go to Olive Garden.
Pay $7.99, $6.99.
That's it. And I'm Kathy Klotz-Guest, everybody. You can check me out at keepingithuman.com, and it's Kathy Klotz-Guest, no hyphen, on Twitter, and Klotz-Guest on Instagram. They said Kathy Klotz-Guest was too long. I think they're wrong. I think, they'll apparently have an axe to grind with Instagram and Olive Garden. So,
oh my God, the second they open that up, I'm going to go get Kathy Klotz-Guest, the longer thing on Instagram, and be like, got that.
You can see what I'm doing, right?
You paid me in breadsticks. You want it back.
You bitch.
I am, right?
Exactly.
Didn't Chris warn you about that?
Yeah, well, I already knew. I still like you. Everybody, thank you so much for a fantastic episode. And maybe we'll have you guys back again, because I love learning about data and new stuff in fun ways. So thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.